Simply Cooking by MmmChef is brought to you in part by Findlay Foods, offering wholesale food distribution services in Ottawa, Kingston, and all points between since 1986.
Focaccia is to Italy what baguette is to France. Stay tuned to see my gluten-free version of a classic focaccia. Homemade bread. Homemade bread is such a staple in most households, and my family and Italian heritage is no exception to that rule. I grew up in a home where we made our own bread. I never tried toast bread or sliced bread unless it was at my mom and my Canadian family's house. In my Italian family's household, there was no purchased bread. It was always made at home. My nonna, my stepmom, and my aunts would spend a weekend or a couple days every month or so, or every few weeks, preparing loaves and loaves of bread. I remember growing up, and seeing them prepare the dough and allowing it to rest on the kitchen table in between bed sheets, actually, and making bread 5, 6, 7, 12 loaves at a time, with the upstairs oven, the downstairs oven, and even the neighbor's oven going. This bread is a crusty Italian bread that was just a loaf. But another really classic Italian bread is a focaccia. A focaccia is a flat bread that you can dip into olive oil and balsamic, or you can slice and turn into a focaccia. When I became gluten-free and I started cooking for people who had celiac, bread and focaccia and pizza dough was something that they and myself were all missing. I have come up with this fantastic gluten-free focaccia recipe, so I'm going to be showing you today how I make my sourdough and turn it into this beautiful focaccia. I'm also going to be making traditional Italian tomato salad, something that my nonna and stepmom and family in Italy made all the time growing up and still make now. Nothing like a fresh Roma tomato from the garden with lots of olive oil, all that juice to dip your focaccia bread into. Delicious. So I'm going to start with my sourdough starter for my focaccia. In real life, focaccia can take a whole day to make, or even 2 days. So I have some parts of it already pre-prepared that I'm just going to walk you through and explain. This is my beautiful sourdough starter. It's a yeasted sourdough. What does that mean? That means that I actually started this with traditional yeast, but I've allowed it to ferment overnight, creating bacterial culture and becoming a sourdough. Traditional sourdough is not started with yeast, but that is a 10-day process, and I didn't have that much time. So I made this last night, and I allowed it to ferment on the counter in a warm spot overnight. You can see all the beautiful bubbles and the fermentation happening. I'm going to show you how to make this. So this is a gluten-free dough, and so because it's gluten-free, it doesn't have the traditional proteins that gluten would have. So the yeast needs starches to eat, and it needs proteins to eat. So I'm putting about 2 tablespoons of quick active dry yeast. This is a pizza yeast, but you can use just a regular active dry yeast, or even a bread yeast, or even a block of yeast, and bloom that in some water for yourself. Because gluten-free doesn't have the same gluten and starch content as a traditional flour, I add a little bit of sugar just so that my yeast has something extra to eat, and this way it will ferment and bubble up really nicely for me. If you saw season 2 of Simply Cooking by MmmChef and watched my pizza episode, I showed you how to turn this same recipe, basically, into a pizza dough. But today, we're doing it in a focaccia style. So it's going to get a lot fluffier and be a little bit less crispy than a pizza dough. I am letting these 2 guys marry together. In real life, I would let this sit for about 10 minutes. But for the sake of TV, I'm going to get it going now. So you see that my yeast and my water and sugar has all been dissolved and is nicely together. To this, I'm adding a scoop of my gluten-free flour blend. My gluten-free flour blend is a blend of different gluten-free flours, and it has the xanthan gum right in there as a stabilizer. If your gluten-free flour does not have the stabilizer, xanthan gum already in the mix, then that's something you're going to have to get and add yourself. But most all-purpose one-for-one gluten-free flour nowadays actually have that in it for you, which is really nice and convenient. So I'm making what I like to call a slurry. This is not a dough yet, as you see, and it's not as thick as a batter yet. This will thicken over time. If you notice the two different ones, you've got the one that I've just mixed. It's still watery and liquidy. This, at this point, is where I would set this aside overnight with a cloth over top, like this. And I would let this sit overnight or for at least 3 or 4 hours so that it could turn into this. So let's pretend we've fast forwarded to tomorrow morning or a few hours from now, and this actually turns into this. So the next day or a few hours later, you've got your sourdough. It's had a long time to ferment, and before I stirred it, before you guys came, it had actually grown quite big. Right where you see the line here, it grew to, but I gave it a nice stir to bring the air down. This is what I turn into my actual focaccia. So now that my slurry is at this point here, I'm going to add a couple scoops of flour, and I'll show you the consistency that I'm looking for. Because the humidity can be different in every household, and the elevation, and the dampness of the gluten-free flour blend that you are choosing to use, I don't actually measure anything in this recipe. I actually go by feel. This is the point where I would also now add my olive oil. I'm just gonna take my lid off because I wanna use like half a cup in here. All right, I'm gonna give this a really nice stir. And unlike a traditional dough that is made with gluten, I'm not actually looking for it to come together into a ball. I want this to be really sticky so that it can continue to aerate and we get a nice and fluffy gluten-free focaccia. This is still too liquidy. I think I'm gonna add 2 more scoops to show you the consistency that I'm looking for. I cook my focaccia bread actually in the oven at 425 on convection setting. If you don't have convection setting on your oven, you can just use 450 at a regular bake. And you can see now that it is becoming a tighter dough, but it's not a ball. I'm looking for it to pull away from the sides, which it's starting to do. You gotta give some good muscle to get this guy stirred up. The difference between a gluten dough and a non-gluten dough is that a gluten-free dough is typically a lot denser and a lot heavier. See how it's not really a ball, but when I touch it with my fingers, it doesn't stick too much, and it seems to be pulling away really nicely from the side of the bowl. This is the perfect consistency that I'm looking for. I've got my pan lined with parchment here, and I am gonna get my hands really dirty. I'm pouring a bunch of olive oil on the bottom, getting it all over. I am getting rid of my spoon and plopping this heavy bowl with my greasy hands into my pan. See if I can get that out with my fingers. Sorry about the mess. There we go. And I'm just flattening this out. You can use wet fingers, will really help it not stick, or you can pour some more olive oil on your hands and it won't allow it to stick. This is where I take a ton more of olive oil. And now I'm going to add my fresh herbs. I have some fresh thyme and some fresh rosemary from my garden. And I'm going to put this on here. Then I'm actually going to set this focaccia to the side and allow this to rest for at least an hour, ideally up to 3 hours. And then once it's grown and it's rested, that's when I'll pop it into the oven, let it get nice and crispy, which will take about 35 to 40 minutes. And I'm gonna do that on the break, and when we come back, I'll show you my tomato salad, and then we'll assemble some sandwiches with my focaccia. See you then.
This program is brought to you in part by Findlay Foods, providing wholesale food distribution services including gluten-free, halal, kosher, and many other products in the Ottawa and Kingston areas.
Food and discussion go hand in hand. Join the conversation on Instagram at MmmChef. Send us your questions. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you like to make. Maybe even send a picture of your own culinary creations. Good food, bringing people together for centuries.
This is that beautiful, messy focaccia that I got into the pan before the break. I've allowed it to rest and rise for almost 3 hours. Look how fluffy and how much it's grown. I have put some dimples in it with my fingers so that the olive oil can stay in the holes, because as it grows, the olive oil kind of flows everywhere. This is now when I'm going to put my super coarse Italian Mediterranean sea salt on top, because we love that salty crunch on top of a traditional focaccia. Now, like this, it's ready to go in the oven. I have my oven set, like I mentioned, to 425 on convection or 450 on regular bake. I'm actually gonna pop this in. My favorite way to do it actually is after about 10 minutes, I turn it down 25 degrees, and then that is what the finished product will look like. So, focaccia and tomato salad. People who know Italian cuisine probably have seen a caprese salad, which is thinly sliced tomatoes with fresh buffalo mozzarella, basil, and olive oil. This is kind of a take on that, but it's dairy-free. It just naturally is. This is a salad that I've grown up eating. It is the flavor of my childhood. My Nonna makes it, my stepmom makes it, everyone in my family makes it. There are different versions of it, but I'm going to show you today my favorite and the simplest version. So, a real chef would have a chef knife and cut on the cutting board, but I'm gonna make this salad for you the way that my Nonna would make it for me. And she didn't go to culinary school or learn knife skills, so this is her favorite knife, a paring knife, and she cuts everything with a paring knife. I'm gonna pull this in front of me to show you. So there are so many different types of tomatoes, just like there are so many different types of apples. And there are different varieties that work for different procedures and recipes. So a lot of people are used to a beefsteak tomato, which is this one here. This is a great tomato for slicing for sandwiches. So I'm gonna actually put this one to the side, because I'm gonna slice this one up in the next segment to turn my focaccia into some sandwiches. These are Roma tomatoes, and this is the perfect tomato to make a tomato salad. It holds up nice with the olive oil and salt on it, but it has just enough juice to create a beautiful dressing in the bottom of the bowl that we can dip our crusty focaccia into later. So this is how my Nonna makes this salad. We take the middle out, spacca, as she would say, break the tomato in half, and cut it into similar sizes that are not necessarily uniform. I'm gonna do 2. Spacca, that means like split. Split the tomato in half. This salad can be added with like bocconcini cheese or Parmigiano Reggiano. You can actually cut up your focaccia bread into little tiny croutons and put it right into the salad. That's when you would call this a panzanella salad. But we're just doing a Insalata Pomodoro, which is just a classic tomato salad. Do you see how this tomato holds up? It's got some body, but it still has enough liquid to give us a little bit on the bottom of the bowl. This salad is usually made with white cooking onion, but I really love red onion, and I think it goes really well with this salad. Again, I would usually be using a chef knife for this, but I'm gonna show you how my nonna would do it. Onion done, spacca the onion in half, and as thin as I can possibly make it. What I love about this salad is that it's good in the summer because when tomatoes are fresh and are right off the vine, there really is no other flavor better than that. But even in the winter with grocery store tomatoes, with a flavorful olive oil, a little bit of garlic, lots and lots of salt and fresh basil, the satisfaction is just the same. Sometimes I'll make this, instead of in a bowl cut up in little pieces, I'll make it kind of like a caprese, where I slice the tomato into rounds, place them on a platter, dice some onion, sprinkle it on top, and do my basil on there. Let me get my last tomato. Look at this, how beautiful it is, and it has a little bit of liquid in the bottom. So earlier this morning, I took a beautiful leg of prosciutto. I buy it whole from Italy, and prosciutto is a cured pork leg. I sliced that this morning fresh, and I've got it in the fridge behind me. And after I build this salad, and when we come back from the break, I'm going to spacca, which is split in half, my focaccia bread, and I'm gonna build some paninis so we can have this delicious Italian tomato basil salad with some crusty focaccia panini. Now it's time for my olive oil. Way more than you think. You don't be shy with the olive oil. We want enough liquid in the bottom so that we can dip our bread in there. And salt, lots of salt, more salt than you think. I have a coarse ground sea salt here. I'm actually grinding it up so it's a little bit finer. And don't be shy with the salt when it comes to tomatoes. You want the salt to help draw out that liquid. Give this a lovely toss. Look how pretty that is. You can roll your basil like a chef, where you lay the leaves one on top of each other and line them up so that you can get a beautiful chiffonade. But I'm going for the rustic Nonna's version. So I'm just going to tear this basil. If you don't have any fresh basil, or it's the middle of winter and you don't have access to it, another way that we make this salad is by leaving the basil out altogether. And instead of basil, I use dried oregano. Both versions of this salad are unique in their own way and just as delicious. Of course, we all know, if you've seen my show before, how much I love basil. So basil is my favorite. But dried oregano is pretty darn good. I have this beautiful, purple basil, which is something that my Nonna does not have in her garden, but I thought it would be really pretty color contrast. Love it. So here we have our beautiful tomato salad. Look at that. Look at that juice. So I like to make this far in advance. You can make it even that morning for that night. Do not refrigerate your tomatoes. That's a tip. Don't ever refrigerate your tomatoes because they become mushy inside. Tomatoes should be always left on the counter. And same goes for this salad. We're gonna leave this salad on the counter so that it can marinate and create as much juice for us so that we have a lot of juice to dip our focaccia in. I'm gonna go to the break, get all of my sandwich pieces out of the fridge, and when we come back, I'm gonna build some paninis. See you then.
Be sure to follow Daniela on Instagram at MmmChef for all the latest posts, including behind-the-scenes looks of the Simply Cooking set and some delicious culinary creations that will definitely make you hungry. After all, we do eat with our eyes.
Look at my beautiful focaccia. This has been cooled completely, and listen to that. Can you hear it? It's hollow inside. That's the sound that we're looking for. Something about gluten-free bread is that you do not want to slice it when it's still warm. It has to be cooled 100%. So this is actually a focaccia that I made yesterday so that I could allow it to cool completely for us. I have a beautiful sandwich set up here for a panini, and I'm just going to show you how we build our sandwiches. I'm cutting the edges off of my focaccia because I want the crusty part to use in my tomato salad so that it can soak up all of that delicious tomato juice. And also I'm cutting the crusts off so that I can get a really nice focaccia sandwich bun without the crusty outsides. And then it'll be easier for us to eat. I'm going to cut this into 4, well, not equal, but almost equal slices. And I'll show you how to build a focaccia sandwich. Actually, look how many sandwiches I'm gonna get out of this. I'm gonna get 8 sandwiches out of this. So I'll do 2. So a panini is something that is so Italian. In the afternoon, we have an espresso break, sometimes with something sweet or sometimes with a panini. Everyone loves an Italian panini. My favorite panini is just tomato, lettuce, mayo, a little bit of hot pepper, and some prosciutto. I have a meat slicer at home, so I was able to buy a full leg of prosciutto that I keep, and I slice it on demand. But you can buy prosciutto sliced just like this from your local deli counter. They'll slice it fresh for you. Or you can actually now buy packages of pre-sliced prosciutto. So check out this bubble. Have you ever seen a gluten-free bread with such bubble and such give? It's so nice. I bet you could serve this to a group of people and they wouldn't even know it was gluten-free. So let's start with mayo. We definitely need some mayo on the bottom of our panini. And we have some beautiful butter lettuce that I'm gonna grab a couple slices and just place there. And this here is a very, very hot chili sauce that my family makes every year, and we jar so that we can eat this all year round. This is so spicy. So spicy that I'm only gonna put this much on my bread. If you have sriracha in your fridge or even chili flakes, you could add some chili flakes right to your mayo, or you could just squirt some sriracha on there. Then I have these beautiful preserved bell peppers and zucchini. This is a preserved vegetable that my nonna makes every year. Italians are very known for preserved veggies that we use in antipasti or in sandwiches. Some people make the aubergine or eggplant, and that's what they put on their sandwich. Look how nice that is. We also make a similar thing with mushrooms. It's basically just really thinly sliced veggies that we remove the seeds from and marinate in an olive oil, salt, garlic, and sometimes a bit of vinegar mixture. And then we jar it and actually seal the jars. Then I have this beautiful freshly sliced prosciutto that I sliced on my slicer today. So if you eat dairy, right here would be a great spot to put some provolone cheese or a soft Havarti or even some fresh buffalo mozzarella. And I'm gonna close that up and give this a slice in the middle. And we're going to check that out. A beautiful Italian panino on some fresh focaccia. Oh my goodness, I forgot my favorite part, the tomato. Let me cut this tomato in half so that it can fit inside my sandwich. We've got my beautiful focaccia sandwich. And so these little pieces of extra bread here is what I want to dip into my salad. Let me move these to the side just so that you guys can get an idea of what I'm doing. This can be turned into croutons, so you can cut these up and keep them in a Ziploc bag in your freezer or in an airtight container. So you have croutons, gluten-free, to add to your salads as you wish. But I'm actually looking forward to this. Check out this juice. Look how simple yet delicious this spread is. And gluten-free focaccia doesn't have to be scary. It's very simple. And my salad here, the most simplest of all the salads, is the most delicious. The taste of my childhood.